Good morning. This is Tim Stewart. I'm president at Visual Decisions, and we're here today to talk about how to get started with Industry 4.0. At Visual Decisions, we've been in the business of utilizing information from the shop floor to improve operations since about 2002. We help our customers combine the smart factory with the lean factory to drive improvements to cost, throughput, and quality. Our customers have seen dramatic improvements, such as 30% increases in OEE, 50% scrap reductions, and much more. Let's see how we get started with that. So as an introduction, I'm going to spend like one slide talking about what is Industry 4.0 and then get into how we get started with it. So the reason that we look at Industry 4.0 in the first place is that there are tremendous possibilities for companies that implement this and implement it well. This is from the World Economic Forum, and as you can see, there are huge increases to productivity, to speed, agility, sustainability, and more that are possible if you implement these technologies well. So also from the World Economic Forum, the item on the right, the diagram there, is their graphic for what are the different technologies that are encompassed within Industry 4.0. As you can see, it covers a lot of ground. So I just want to talk about, when I'm talking about Industry 4.0, what are the technologies that I'm including within there that Visual Decision specializes in. And as you can see in kind of the blue box that popped in, we really specialize in IoT, which is the collection of a lot of data from the shop floor and so forth, advanced analytics, machine learning and AI, augmented reality. These are a collection of technologies that really help you gather data and display it in such a way that you can create workflows for your people to utilize that information to improve the process. So with that top one, just as a quick example, there are so many different things that you can do with the Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things. And these are just examples from one partner of mine, PTC, that they lay out as possible things that you can do with the Internet of Things on the shop floor. But I will caution you that Industry 4.0 technology alone is not enough, and I'll stick with IoT as an example here. I've been wearing a Fitbit for almost 9 years now, and the Fitbit works great. It's a great example of an IoT device. If you think about it, it has advanced sensors. It collects information directly from your wrist or wherever you're wearing it. It pushes that information to a cloud-based application. It has machine learning that translates that raw sensor data into heartbeats and footsteps and everything else. It has pretty charts and graphs that it displays on your mobile device, on the web, on your tablet, whatever it might be. But I haven't lost the weight. In fact, I've gained 20 pounds during those 9 years that I've been wearing the Fitbit. So is it the Fitbit itself? And the answer is no. The Fitbit does exactly what it's supposed to do. And by and large, all of these IoT technologies, AR technologies, everything else, they really do pretty much exactly what they say they're going to do for the most part. The issue is that I haven't changed my behaviors. And because I haven't changed my behaviors, I haven't eaten less, I haven't exercised more, etc., I haven't lost the weight. And it's the exact same thing on the shop floor. In order to get the advantage from implementing these solutions, to take advantage of the enablers that they provide to your business, you really have to change the culture and the process of your operations. Fundamentally, your people have to do something differently tomorrow than they do today in order to see the benefits that you're hoping to get from these solutions. So what we work to do is to combine the smart factory with the lean factory. You already have processes in place to improve your operations. So if you can combine these smart factory technologies with what you're already doing from a lean manufacturing perspective, from an operational excellence, Six Sigma, whatever you call your improvement, process, then you can, start to, really see the benefits from implementing these technologies, because they enable things within those operational excellence processes that you previously didn't have the capability for. So just as an example, if you can think through how you do root cause analysis today, with having to collect data manually, try to guess what data it is that you need to collect and so forth, and then if you're out there with a clipboard and a stopwatch, you're not really collecting the detailed information about the process that might help you diagnose what the true issue is. I have a customer that has a problem. They're in the automotive industry. They have a problem that happens like 3 times a year. And because it happens so infrequently, they have a really hard time collecting data on what's happening when that fault occurs. But because that fault occurs, 3 times a year, the OEM forces them to do a 100% manual inspection, not only on that one part, but every single part that goes through that same process, they have to do a 100% manual inspection on. With traditional problem solving activities, they're not able to capture what's going on when that fault occurs. But by collecting the detailed information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we're hoping that we're going to be able to capture what is actually going on in that process when that fault occurs, and then be able to do that root cause analysis and eliminate the conditions that are causing that infrequent fault. So there are a lot of things that you can do once you start combining the traditional problem solving methods that you already have with all of this additional data and capability that you're putting in place. So when we look at a path to success and how we recommend going about implementing operations 4.0, industry 4.0, et cetera, the basic steps are over here on the left side. To paraphrase Stephen Covey, you have to begin with the end in mind. And, part of that is just mapping out the vision, understanding how are you actually going to derive value from implementing these solutions. And so, what we do first with our customers, and I'll get more into this, is to start with, what are the main objectives that you have as an organization, and understand what are the key impediments to that performance. And once we understand that, then we can start to look for, at least some level of root cause analysis on what are the things that are driving those impediments. What are the things, the roadblocks that you have, out on your shop floor that are preventing better performance. And by identifying those and finding enablers to either mitigate or eliminate those roadblocks, then we can chart the course to much improved performance in the future. So then we want to get started quickly, and we want to build momentum on the project and so forth. And so how can we leverage the existing investments that you already have on the shop floor? So undoubtedly you collect some information. Whether you persist it and utilize it effectively is another question. But if you can, if you have some data collection out there, how can we make that information more visible, more accessible, and more tied into the process, the improvement process, so that people are utilizing that data more effectively? We start to build that data-driven culture, that idea that we're going to utilize that information that we have to improve the process every day. And then we look at filling the capability gaps. How do we collect that detailed information that will help us identify the root cause for some of those periodic failures and so forth? And then integrating across different processes. The example I use here all the time is warranty. So we can look at warranty data and see which items, which SKUs and so forth are failing out in the field. And we can track various information about that. Is it happening in cold weather states, warm weather states, et cetera? But if we can tie that back into the production data, when those items went through manufacturing, maybe we can start to identify, well, our tolerance is, X wide, but anytime that we see things that are close to that limit, they end up in warranty more often. So we can start to do those correlations. And if that's the case, then maybe what we do is we simply tighten up that particular tolerance. And now when we hold that tolerance, we're able to see fewer instances of warranty claims out in the field. So just a quick example of why integrating across different processes is important. But then you also have tying that back into engineering and product development, and being able to do a true design for manufacturability, design for Six Sigma type of capability as well. But as we talked about previously, none of this will have a huge impact on your organization unless you simultaneously transform the culture in the process. So at each and every single step here, we're looking at how do we work with the quality department to change what they do on a daily basis? How do you work with production to change what they do? How do you change the standard work and so forth? What are the visual controls that we need to put in place to create positive feedback loops within our organization and so forth? How do we create a digital management operating system that allows us to drive that alignment all the way from the COO's office all the way down through the people on the shop floor? And so those are the types of things that we have to keep in mind as we're implementing these systems in order to really have that real success that we're looking for. So how do we develop the vision and the strategy for implementing this? So at Visual Decisions, I talked about how we go about identifying the value in the first place. And we really start off with that top-down benefits case. What are the key things that the business is trying to achieve? And that might be better throughput, it might be better quality, it might be reducing inventory, time to market, any number of different initiatives that might be there. And then we look at what are the impediments to that increased performance, and then what are the root causes for that. But then we also look to identify what are the enablers that we can put in place. What is in this really broad Industry 4.0 toolkit that we saw in that really small print graphic from the World Economic Forum. And what are the things that we can do with that that will allow us to address those root causes for our current performance. But then also we have to think through, what are the changes in culture that we need to do? What are the training processes that we have to put in place? What are the process changes that we have to make in order to really utilize this new data, these new capabilities that we're putting in place, so that we can adapt our process to utilize those things most effectively. And those are the things, those process changes and the cultural changes, those are what are really going to drive the benefits and the outcome for us. So as we're thinking about all this, one of the things that we really want to factor in as we come up with this different portfolio of projects is the ease of implementation. So for some things, it's pushing that boulder uphill, right? You put in a huge effort and you get kind of a small result from it. And the alternative is that there are some things that are much easier to get done. There are things that your people are dying for out there. And so if you just put it in place, they'll eagerly adopt it and so forth. And so those are things that just take a small effort, but can lead to huge results. And so as we're looking at the different things that we can put in place, what are those things that allow us to really focus on putting that small effort in place and getting those big results? And part of that is understanding kind of the soft benefits, right? So as the individual and so forth, how does it really impact the people in the process? Does this make their job more fun? Are there ways that we can help motivate people, gamify things and so forth? Can we set up, kind of fun competitions, as putting visual controls out on the lines to set up a competition between the different lines for production goals and so forth. So those are different things that we can think about, as well as value to the society, industry, the firm, factory, and so forth, for some of these soft benefits that may change the acceptance and the adoption of these different technologies out on the shop floor. Another consideration that has become much more important in the past couple of years anyway, is this idea of agility versus efficiency. So with efficiency, we're really just trying to minimize that cost of production and distribution, and carry minimal amounts of inventory, have minimal amounts of excess capacity and so forth, and run things as close to the bone as we possibly can while still getting the results that we're looking for. Agility allows us to maximize the responsiveness to market dynamics and unexpected events, as we've seen in the past couple of years. So with supply chain issues, with labor issues and so forth, and people not showing up for work, and people retiring or leaving their jobs and so forth, how do we as a company maximize our not just agility but robustness to these different disruptions? And some of that is keeping more inventory. Some of that is having excess capacity in different areas, so that if this type of product doesn't show up, we can utilize capacity to do this product instead. And so there's a bit of a trade-off there. And as we're looking at these different projects, how can we balance keeping the company agile while still pushing for efficiency as much as possible? And a couple of weeks ago, I did a webinar on how to really take this trade-off between agility and efficiency and shift that entire curve so that you can achieve both. And then finally, as we take these different factors into account with the different projects that we could put in place in this portfolio, we want to balance these things out, time to value versus overall value. Obviously, we want to do the things that are going to be fast, that have a really high return, but we also want to look at the confidence that we have. How likely is this to be adopted by our people? How, what other roadblocks do we have? What are the interdependencies between these different projects that we need to take into consideration as one builds upon the success of the other and so forth? And then also just how well does this tie into the operational priorities of the business, and make sure that we have a real good program and not just individual projects. So with all that said, let's start diving into a little bit more of the details of what are the different things that you can achieve with Industry 4.0, and the different projects that you can put in place, and how we actually go about analyzing that. So one factor in this that is probably the most common that companies are going after is how do we increase that efficiency? How do we operate closer to our peak capacity? Because best in class in many industries, does vary by industry and so forth, but for many industries, best in class is around 85% OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. And for many companies, they're operating 40 to 60%, and some companies I've been to are significantly below that. So obviously, if you're losing that much capacity, you are running with more people than you have to. You're running with more equipment than you have to. If you're in the situation where if you could make more, you could sell more, there are obvious ways to increase that capacity or increase that utilization, and then see your throughput go up and your revenues go up as a result of that. And so as we look at different operational metrics that we can improve, certainly throughput is one of those. Reducing the total cost of quality. is something that many companies are looking for when they look to implement these systems. Reducing maintenance or tooling costs, replacing inventory with information, compressing time to market, etc. These are all things that are potential benefits and different kind of high-level objectives that you can identify and pursue with these different technologies. And of course, all of this ties into the financial performance. So operational metrics and financial metrics should be aligned. They should be different views of that Rubik's Cube of the true operations. And so, as we're impacting throughput, there should be some impact on the P&L. And as we look at, for instance, just OEE, improving OEE, improving that one metric potentially impacts every single one of these different line items on an income statement, P&L, as well as a balance sheet. I talked about how I can increase revenues by increasing my throughput, but there are other ways, other impacts that that can have on revenue as well. If I'm losing customers or not getting business because my lead times are too long, if I improve my OEE, I can reduce my lead times and therefore capture that additional revenue. Many different ways that I can go about that. And then obviously material costs, direct labor, outsourcing because of capacity, et cetera, can all get impacted by improving those operational metrics. So what is the actual process that we as Visual Decisions go through to investigate these issues with our customers? We have a roadmap workshop that we utilize that is an assessment to identify and quantify opportunities in manufacturing operations and define a results-based implementation plan to deliver targeted improvements in business performance. So the key parts here is that it's customer need driven rather than software feature and function. And we're not focusing on particular pieces of software. We're not looking at particular pieces of hardware. We're trying to take an agnostic view and really look at, what are you trying to achieve as a business and what are the impediments, what are the roadblocks, and then what are the enablers that we can put in place that address those. We try to target key problem areas and quantify the identified opportunities. So have that value proposition at the end. Define a roadmap with clear timeline and deliverables. So putting that in place that we have not just here's the first project we're going to work on, but defining that entire portfolio and having that overall program in place for what we want the next 3 to 5 years to look like. And then have plans in place to deliver gains within those first 6 to 12 months by leveraging some of those existing investments that you already have in place more effectively out on the shop floor. So the value of these workshops, is agreement of where you are today, where you want to be in the future, how you align the business and stakeholders, because change really only happens when you have enough people bought in. You have to get that, adoption within your organization. And so the more people and the more different groups that can have input into that process up front, you're going to get more adoption on the back end from them as a result of that. You want to have that roadmap in place with that long-term vision that lowers risk for implementation and also, looks at how we can maximize the return on those different projects. And then also, have a balanced approach to drive that cultural adoption that will be required. So just kind of looking at the roadmap workshop itself, we want to define and understand the scope of the problems, define the current performance and future aspirations, map the opportunity to the technology enablers and so forth, validate the business case, and prioritize the deployment of these different enablers. And then we want to do that across the process, the policy, performance, people, and platform. And so we basically combine all of these different views into the analysis that we do when we're working with the customers. Some key factors, participation is obviously key. We have to have support from executive management to free up people's time to really go through this analysis. We have to have a clear definition of expectations. And so, as we're looking at defining this, potentially very large program of different initiatives that might be part of this. And so, we work very closely with the customer to identify, and define what those deliverables are going to look like. Preparation is key in life, as in this project. And so, we have to identify, the key participants and so forth, help them understand what it is that we're trying to achieve in the process that we go through, and then gather the appropriate data in advance. And so we're ready when we begin this project with the data that we're going to require to perform this analysis. And then, with COVID going kind of up and down all the time, normally in the past, we've done all of these on site and work directly with people on the shop floor and everything else to kind of optimize the amount of time spent. But over the past couple of years, we have put processes in place that allow us to do this offsite and have that same level of focus, but do it remotely. So we actually have an application that we've developed that helps us go through this process with customers, and brings us through an analysis, a structured analysis that lets us identify what are the key opportunities for the business, what are the inputs to that process, what are the different causal factors for that analysis that let us weight, what are the different causal factors at play for that individual customer, and then identify what can we do about those things. And so just using OEE as an example, there are different financial and functional inputs that get associated with that opportunity. And then as we break that down into the root causes, you have unplanned stops, changeovers, short stops, reduced speed, production scrap, setup scrap, typical big six losses for OEE. And there are typical losses for each of the different initiatives. So from business to business, the types of losses are very common. What's very different from business to business is how much time you're losing to unplanned stops versus short stops versus reduced speed versus changeovers and so forth. And so, as we look at what are the different capabilities that we can put in place with Industry 4.0 and how do they tie to those different causals, we've developed a very significant amount of intellectual property that maps all of that out so that we can very quickly go through that process with our customers. And we've put that in the form of a web application that's very simple to walk through. It has a nicely defined workflow, allows us to get through that interview process with the different constituents very quickly, allows us to do that capability mapping to those root causes, and then allows us to look at what are the outputs from that. What is the potential value that we're going to see in summary and so forth. What is the return on investment percentage? What's the year one payback? What's the net present value of the investment and so forth? And then, looking at that from a phased perspective so that we can see, month one, month two, month three, how much of a return will we get very rapidly from this process. And then, continuing on, looking at the project planning, for the different things that we're going to do, the different individual initiatives as part of this overall program, how much of an impact do we think that those things are going to have, so that we can do that trade-off between what is the timeline for that initiative, what is the amount of value that we think we can achieve, and how do we best balance that time to value versus overall value. And then being able to look at the relationship for the different initiatives that we would put in place versus either the root causes or all the way up to the financial impact, and being able to look at that relationship between the initiatives that we have and the overall performance that we'll get for the business. So with that, I want to thank you for the half hour of your time. If you have questions, please reach out to me at tim@visualdecisions.com or my phone number there, and we can discuss more and potentially see how Visual Decisions can help you with your process to get started on Industry 4.0. Thank you very much, and we'll talk again next week.